Speaking of what the whole world has heard of, Brian, should we lead off with well, I can't say the police blotter, but the court report here on the Jim Cornette Experience today? We can discuss the recent lawsuits that have been, lawsuit with different counts. I don't know, it could be plural, that have been filed, and our thoughts and impressions on same.
Well, there's a lot going on and a lot broke this week about this, and of course, because of it, you trended. Naturally.
I know, of course. Now it's like when Cornette's lawnmowers have done something or whatever. No, I'm so inextricably linked with the Honorable Stephen P. New, counselor at law. But I trend when he makes news now, and he makes a lot of news.
Well, here's how it was reported by the Wrestling News, who broke the story.
Well, hold on. I think it's fair that before that you read the whys and wherefores of what has happened, that I preface this by saying that, first of all, Stephen P. New is your and mine's attorney, along with other people in the wrestling industry, as it had been known. But attorney-client privilege doesn't mean that if this guy is your attorney, he can discuss all his clients with you, right? No. It's specific to the client involved. So what I'm trying to say is, just because Stephen is our attorney and close personal friend, he hasn't spilled his guts about what the fuck is going on here or told us details that are not available to the public. We want to make that clear. So we are going to talk about and opine upon what's been reported and filed publicly and said by the participants out in the open. But we will also preface this by saying Stephen P. New, at this point in his life, Brian, I think you can agree, does not need to take cases that he doesn't think that he can win and significantly make change in a field from, just for the fun of it. Because he's very busy, he makes a lot of money, and he doesn't have time like the guy that tried to get everybody that ever worn a pair of boots to sue the WWE, and his office was in a spare room in his house somewhere in fucking suburban California. So we're going to dismiss the thought at the top of this that this is some kind of publicity stunt, or as people might say, something frivolous. He's past the point where he has the time on his hands to take bullshit cases, just see his name in the news. He's fucking with the governor in the state of West Virginia on a regular basis. He gets in the newspaper a lot.
I wouldn't say he's fucking with the governor in the state of West
he's
Virginia.
Trying to keep him in line.
That's more like it, yeah.
Well, that's fucking with a governor sometimes. Trying to keep him on the straight and narrow, depends on who they are. But anyway, read the publicly issued details of the case so that we can go over it.
Well, again, these were broken by the Wrestling News on Wednesday. 3 former talents terminated by AEW have brought a lawsuit against the company, among others. The suit, brought by announcer Kevin Kelly and wrestlers Brandon and Brendan Tate, was filed on August 30th in Philadelphia County, Pennsylvania, Court of Common Pleas, by attorneys Stephen P. New and Benjamin Baer, and is seeking to void the arbitration clause of their talent contracts, as well as requesting the court certify a class action suit against AEW over claims the company is misclassifying its wrestling talent as independent contractors rather than employees. Let's stop there momentarily, because that kind of explains a part of this. Any initial thoughts?
Well, I'd like to jump on that one last. Keep going.
In April, it was reported that the Tate brothers, known professionally as the Boys... I'm sorry.
You know... There's the boys.
Known professionally as the Boys, were released from their Ring of Honor contracts due to budget cuts. Ring of Honor owner Tony Khan claimed during media events that their release was due to no-showing several events, a claim the brothers deny. That claim is now at the center of a defamation allegation against Khan by the Tate brothers. You want me to keep going or stop there?
No. There's what we can start with that, because with all due respect to the boys, this is the one that personally, whoever's right and whichever way it goes, I don't give a shit particularly, because I did say, but it might go to more overall the broader case, as we will see here in a second. I think for them to be on national television at that stage of the game in the wrestling business these days, as I think I mentioned on the show a while back, they should have ridden a bus, right, to get to wherever. However, other facts have emerged with these dueling stories, and having been a booker, promoter, producer, talent, whatever the fuck, I've seen a lot of this bullshit. That the point is, the overriding thread of this whole suit is bad communication and bullshit communication and no communication and nobody settling issues. So,
and defamation potentially.
Well, defamation potentially as a result of none of this being settled and this fucking thing being run, as Guy Coffey used to say, like a flea market. So the bone of contention seems to be that the boys who live in Knoxville, Tennessee, were flying out of Knoxville, Tennessee. But then somehow they wanted them to fly to wherever it was. I can't remember. It might have been overseas or who the fuck knows. Out of Nashville.
Maybe it was Canada.
Canada. There's not a sea, but there's a border. So it's 3 hours minimum from Knoxville to Nashville, so it is a significant distance, but well, they should have driven. Except now that we've sat back and seen some of the other things going on, what kind of notice did they get since they had been being flown out of Knoxville? Then does their ticket just show up and nobody called their attention to it? Or did they call them the week before and say, hey, you got to fly out of Nashville? Or did they look down at their paperwork or however these things are delivered these days and see suddenly there's a goddamn wrong airport and they're 3 hours away? Holy shit. What kind of communication was there between them and the office? I assume, like all the kids, they text each other, which is fucking problematic in a lot of cases because nobody knows what the fuck people are talking about on a text anyway most of the time. But did they say, hey, why this wrong airport? Oh, well, Tony says you got to do that. Did they say, well, we can't make it? Or did they say, we can't make it? And then they said, Tony says you got to do that. And then nothing, crickets. Well, then as a booker or talent relations guy, or whatever, if you don't hear from the talent's mouth when there's a issue about whether they're going to make the show or not, if you don't hear from their lips or their text, okay, I'll be there, and you just leave the conversation, then you've dropped the ball. But then if they say we can't make it, we can't get there, we don't have a way to go, whatever the fuck, then you've left, then it's not a no-show if they ain't there, because the last thing they said to you was, we can't get there. Here's another thing. What stooge did they tell that all this was going on with when Tony Khan is at the show? Did they want to tell Tony, well, here's this 5-minute story about how we're fucking with their travel and get yelled at? Or does Tony say, where's the boys? They didn't show up. What the...
And, that is part of, I think, what AEW, from what I think I've seen, has argued, which is that this wasn't a single isolated incident. There may have been other incidents where...
Okay, then that's AEW's fault if it was all over travel. Because after the first time when the boys ain't there, then why weren't you there? You sent us tickets for an airport fucking 3 hours away from our goddamn homes, and then we got to fly or whatever the fuck. Well, it was cheaper. Goddamn, whatever. You don't, with all the other things going on in this company, you don't say, okay, well, we're going to do the same thing again. And then they say, well, we're going to do the same thing again because he was saying multiple shows. So how does it not get resolved if they ain't going to do it, you don't book them again?
But again, too, the contradiction between announcing that they were fired due to budget cuts, and then after they came out, I forget what exactly they said, they were somewhat outspoken about some nature of this. That's when Tony Khan was asked about it at a press conference.
And then he said they no-show.
Yeah, he was asked specifically about them, and he said it was because of issues with them showing up. So AEW put out two different sides of the same story.
And besides that, and then that's when you've defamed us because now people think, what the fuck, are we a couple of dickheads that ain't going to show up? So, but like I said, I don't care either way, but we're getting to the better part.
But the other thing too, in terms of the travel, just the specific example going from Knoxville to Nashville, again, it goes to the argument about what is an independent contractor. You know, if you're ordering them around and saying, you got to go here, you got to do this, are they an independent contractor or are they an employee?
Well, and also just, I mean, we just saw him buy like 150 plane tickets to fucking England, right? So
he rents songs that he'll pay more than he'll pay the boys together over 10 years. So
yes,
it's not an issue.
So I think it might be hard for the boys to fucking, and was this a thing that has happened to anyone else or no one else? Were they the only ones who said, well, you're so fucking insignificant on this list of insignificant people?
We see that's one of the things if I was AEW, just based on little things I know from communicating with people, I'd be worried about that, because if this ever got to Discovery, that shit comes out. The disorganization, the confusion, people texting and not getting answers or emailing and not getting answers. It brings the AEW office into focus. But, you know, we'll see.
Well, but speaking of bringing more of AEW into focus, because they're still a little blurry, then Kevin Kelly steps in.
Yeah, by the way, for the record, that was technically Ring of Honor. That's Tony Khan, the owner of Ring of Honor. They were Ring of Honor talent, right, when Tony bought Ring of Honor. So now we're going to AEW.
Well, true, yes, because it's the right pocket and the left pocket. Because Tony's always got his hands in his pockets because he likes to play pocket pool.
Well, just so people know, we were always told that Tony Khan bought Ring of Honor outright with his own money. AEW is a joint venture between Tony and his dad and whatever share Warner Brothers has. So it's two different things, but let's go to the next part of this. Real name Kevin Foote. Kevin Kelly is seeking monetary damages, claiming, among other things, that AEW breached his contract and interfered with his ability to find work elsewhere. Also named in the lawsuit is AEW announcer Ian Riccaboni, whom Kelly also seeks monetary damages from and claims defamed him by way of social media after accusing him of being a member of QAnon. Kelly, who joined AEW in June of 2023 after working as the English-speaking commentator for New Japan, was fired from his position as an AEW play-by-play announcer in March, after he went public on his social media expressing his frustrations with the company and Riccaboni. And I have a comment here to close it out from Stephen P. New, of course. I applaud the bravery of these plaintiffs in bringing this long overdue action, challenging the misclassification of pro wrestlers as independent contractors instead of employees. We know we are in for a long, hard fight, but in the end, I believe justice always prevails.
Well, now it gets a little curiouser and curiouser because, again, everybody knows I've known Kevin Kelly since 95. I was the reason why that he was the Ring of Honor announcer for so many years. I'm pretty goddamn sure, although I hate to make declarative statements anymore, Kevin's a religious guy. He might even be a Republican. I don't know, because we don't talk about it, because he knew what I would think straight off the bat. But I'm pretty sure he's not engaging in any kind of goddamn organized QAnon lunacy or whatever the fuck. And probably, I believe it was some type of movie recommendation that he tweeted that led to Ian, who also met briefly and thought was a wonderful guy. So I hate to see these two having issues. Ian took exception to and talked about with people on the internet in what was supposed to be private.
I believe it was a Discord server, so it's a private server.
No, somebody was typing something to somebody on the internet and thought it was going to be private. Seriously? Especially around the wrestling business. So then the bigger issue, it from something that ridiculous. Kevin tweets about a movie. Ian can't resist commenting to someone on the internet instead of, you got to fucking say something in that situation, call somebody on a fucking phone. But because of that, there's now a lawsuit because they're in this goddamn, this company that will not address anything and take care of anything and lets shit fester and boil and bubble. Because think about this. They fired Kevin Kelly. Who else have they haven't fired people who have walked up and punched the fuck out of other employees. And they didn't fire them.
Yeah, that's part of the story. The fact that there's very few people, if you look at who's been fired, like Jimmy Havoc was fired after they found out that he was accused of some sort of sexual impropriety.
Who knows what the fuck it was, but it wasn't, and nobody's seen him since, right? That type of thing.
Right.
That's what you get fired for.
Like CM Punk got fired, and even that took forever.
For beating up the third motherfucker, right?
Right, but you could argue that was an extension of a year earlier, where Tony couldn't pull the trigger and couldn't do anything. He couldn't bring him back, and he couldn't fire him. He just did nothing.
And so, again, the fucking, who was the punch Sammy? Andrade punched Sammy, and fucking Tony sent him home and sent him a check for a fucking year or whatever it was. The point is, look at the bad feelings on Twitter amongst each other and the sniping and the fucking, I threw a chair in your face, gave you brain damage and all this other shit. And these people had to be given a separate show so they could be kept apart and catered to. But yet Kevin and Ian getting a goddamn beef over fucking making snarky comments over the internet, and they can't address this. And when they finally do, they hired Kevin Kelly for 3 years, allegedly at the start it was supposed to be, to leave his job in New Japan. There was a full-time fucking deal and come and do the fucking show. And he was there for like 9 months. And instead of saying, well, if you and Ian are going to have a goddamn knockdown, drag-out fight or something, go home, we'll send you the check like we do everybody else. They sent Miro a check in Bulgaria. So what heinous...
CJ took it. I'm looking for my money.
Yes. And what heinous offense did Kevin Kelly... He went... the story is there. The point is, there's Kevin making appointments with human resources or relations or whatever. This is causing me trouble. I want to address this. People are razzing him on Twitter. I don't know what the fuck's going on. We have a problem with this guy. They won't do anything about it. And finally, they end up, the thing they do about it is fire him again, when there have been people who have literally set fire to shit in that company. They didn't fire him. So what smells about this is part of that, and then the overall theme, the independent contractors. And we've said this way before Stephen P. New was involved in an issue like this. And we blistered that other lawyer for being an obvious moron. I can't believe passed the bar and bringing a lackluster suit that was never going to win because the merits of a real case were winnable. And we've talked about the misclassification umpteen times on this show going back years. So, if you're going to engage these guys in a contract or a deal like this that is not only incredibly one-sided and gives them no benefits and the whole 9 yards, but is restrictive on your side, but then you can just, for apparently any reason, say bye-bye, then the whole foundation of the thing needs to be looked at. And that, I believe, I said at the start of this thing, Stephen P. New does not take cases for things that he doesn't believe in and things that he doesn't believe he can win in. And this is a open and shut example of something that, with a legitimate case in a legitimate court with a legitimate attorney, could prove to be very fucking interesting for the entire wrestling industry.
If you remember when AEW started in 2019, there were people talking about it. I want to say it was Cody, maybe even Tony, that there was a chance that the wrestlers wouldn't be independent contractors. They would be employees, that there'd be a union, that there'd be benefits. A lot of things that EVPs got that wrestlers never got. And nothing ever changed. Tony tries to act like he's the baby face and it's the big mean WWE. He does the same things that they do. It's just he looks like a putz doing it, so you don't take it seriously.
Yeah, well, and think about this now. If this was supposed to be, and without violating any NDAs, I think he said it in a number of places, that it was going to be a very wrestler-friendly company. And the boys were going to have a say in how things went, and the fans were going to appreciate that. And, it was like that, like we said, this biggest crowdfunding effort in history. But the wrestler-friendly company, right? It became the wrestlers that he was friendly with company. The EVPs got all that, and then some of the family members got employment status. But you could have, if he had had any fiscal responsibility, had a manageable talent roster of a legitimate size where that you weren't paying 170 guys and girls and showing half of them on television on any kind of regular basis, if that. If he wasn't paying a couple $100,000 for songs because he's a mark for the Ring of Honor tapes, that type of thing, you could have actually made these people employees and given them the benefits and deducted the Social Security and paid the Social Security, do all the things with the taxes that the normal jobs do. And it wouldn't have cost him anything more than what he's already lost. But he's playing fantasy promoter rather than running responsible business.
Yeah, and what's their argument? I'm not asking this facetiously. What is their argument for firing Kevin Kelly? Is it because of the QAnon thing? Is that what they've said they fired him for? Is it buyer's remorse? What is it? Is AEW firing someone for buyer's remorse?
Well, as soon as he had this issue with Ian is when they stuck Tony on Saturday nights and in the lead chair that Kevin was supposed to occupy. And then remember, we started seeing it. Well, Kevin's over in a corner a lot of the night.
Yeah, but that's part of the thing too. Shivani, who's the ultimate stooge for Tony Khan. What happened when Jim Ross was introduced onto TBS in 1988? Now they like to pretend they're buddies.
Yeah.
There were problems because Shivani thought that he should be where Jim Ross was. And Jim Ross at the time was the best there was in the business. Shivani and Heenan in WCW famously didn't get along. And famously, a lot of it was Shivani's attitude and being a kiss-ass stooge for the office. And here he is here, and Kevin Kelly gets brought in to do Collision from New Japan, right? Was it him and Nigel? I'm trying to remember what the original, I forget who they paired him with now on Collision.
I believe it was Kevin and Nigel.
So they start doing it. Remember the first few weeks with Punk and those FTR matches? We said Kevin Kelly was knocking it out of the park. It seems at some point his confidence was knocked out, and that happens when you shove Shivani in there, an unnecessary third person who then all of a sudden became the lead commentator on the show.
Well, and now we find out that probably that was done because Kevin was having some issue with the office in trying to resolve some of these things.
The office. The office. I mean, you need an office to be an office.
Or as the boys used to say, the orifice.
And the other thing is, you can disagree with parts of this, I guess, as a fan from afar, and realize there are other elements of this that, yeah, of course, and it's not even an AEW thing. Wrestlers are employees. It's a WWE thing, it's an AEW thing. It's not an independent thing. I'll let CMLL deal with their own situation. But WWE controls their wrestlers' lives. AEW may not be as hands-on, but they're as restrictive as they want to be, and as the same kind of restrictions as WWE whenever they want to be, for any reason they want.
Well, it's the same kind of contracts they're signing. It's just that Tony, because he owns the whole thing and answers to no one, can just say, oh, yeah, you can do that if you want to. But the point is, you're not a true independent contractor when you, let's say I'm a painter, Brian, and I paint your house. And you say, wow, you did a great job. And you tell your neighbor, Fred, hey, yeah, this guy did a great job painting my house. And Fred says, well, I'd like to call him and get him to paint my house. And you say, oh, no, I'll tell you whether he can paint your house or not. And I have to go through you to paint his house. Then am I an independent contractor? Or am I pretty much working for you?
That's right.
AEW, and here's the thing. These are the same type of contracts. The numbers are bigger and there's different provisions for all the new types of media and the new things that have come up that have been thought of, but it's the same kind of contracts as they were signing in the 80s, where no matter how much more detailed they get, you're still an independent contractor, even though in the 80s and 90s, pretty much every one of the boys always say, you know what? If I sign this contract, if I don't like it, fuck it. I'm just going to quit and go home, right? It was that kind of thing.
And they did. I mean, that's why you hear about things like Sid going to play softball.
Yeah.
Who does that with a contract? All right, I'll just go home.
Yeah, but that's because it was new in the business, and everybody was used to saying, if I don't like where I'm working, I'm just going to say, fuck you, and
actually, you
go
did
somewhere
that too.
else.
You did that in 1990. You still had a contract when you walked out.
Yes. For till the following May, and that was the end of October. But I said, fuck you, I'm going home. I don't want to be here anymore. But the point is, there was some element of you could always go. So now there's literally nowhere else to go to make anywhere near the level of money as you will earn in WWE, or that Tony Khan will pay you in AEW / Ring of Honor. And even TNA has right of first refusal. That means you can work outside dates as long as you call the TNA office and say, hey, can I work for Brian and Jim on February 28th? Then they say yes, and then you can do it. Well, that's back to the painting story I just talked about. So all the companies where you will make any money control your goddamn career. And if Brian, tell me, I've never worked in the real world. But if you work for a company, they can send you, if you're an employee of a company, they can, any kind of company, a widget company, they can call you in the office, say, hey, the boss wants you to go to Acme Widgets in Cleveland and tell him how we do shit, right?
Yeah, if that was the case, the widget company would pay my airfare. They'd put me up in a hotel. They'd give me a per diem. I'd be able to buy food. I'd have everything taken care of, maybe even a car fee. Because I'm an employee of the company. I'm representing the company. I'm doing business on behalf of the company that would benefit the company.
Yeah.
But what's the difference between that and ordering a wrestler to go to Cleveland to work a show?
Or you go to work for Joe in Cleveland, he'll send you a plane ticket, and he'll have some stooge pick you up in the back seat of his fucking stinky car, and they get a good rate at the hotel in town. Or maybe the local guy will fucking, put you up there.
The wrestlers get $20 off at dinner tonight.
Yeah, but only if you sign autographs for the staff. So that, again... fuck, if they want to be showbiz instead of the fucking good old-fashioned goddamn carny bullshit we used to pull off and love it, then they're going to have to play like big boys, aren't they? If you make somebody an employee, it doesn't mean they have to be an employee for the rest of the goddamn life of the company. But for the time that you're saying that you want them to be there, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, they ought to be an employee.
And by the way, Tony Khan, someone who's constantly battling the perception of him that's created by his behavior and cares a lot about what people say and what people think, and does these media scrums because he wants to be out there and he wants people to listen to him. What would make him a bigger babyface ever than if he actually did it? Because he could do it a lot easier than WWE and their bureaucracy over there. Tony Khan could just say we're doing it. Unless Shad says no. But he would be the biggest babyface ever. Again, like you said, it can't be the giant roster, and there's no reason they should have as many wrestlers as they do.
But hold on, stop, pause, hold that thought, because now they're going to say, Cornette and Last said we ought to fire half the guys. They don't want the boys to have jobs. No, unless you're running a charitable foundation that is subsidizing 150 or 75 people's fucking lives and families, then there's no reason to have a roster in one wrestling company of that many people. But you could treat a smaller number, say 80 or 100, much better, and rotate those people around every few years so everybody gets a chance at it.
Well, the other thing, too, I guess there would be nothing to preclude you from having, let's say, just to throw a number out there, let's say you had 60 employees that were wrestlers. You could still have 20 independent contractors on top of that if they are working in a different way than the employees that are told where to go and what to do and everything.
Yes, if you are booking them per date and paying them a flat fee per date, and they continue to work for other people and other promotions around the world, and if they make your dates a preference, well, that's just peachy keen, but they can't have a written agreement with you that you have first right of refusal, then you're an independent contractor, and they could have those because it would be cheaper for the company, and it would be a better goddamn chance for some of the guys to come from the independents and at least see if they might be translating before they goddamn buy them for 3 years and And again, maybe people in other countries, because we do have the global audience, Brian, don't understand, well, why is it more expensive for a company to make somebody an employee instead of an independent contractor? Because then you pay into their Medicare and their federal, their taxes and the whole 9 yards, and you have to have an insurance plan that they can be involved in, and you're paying for that. And we've always said that the territories, and it is still true, even Crockett Promotions in his biggest year in the 80s would not have been able to afford to make the wrestlers employees for all the different expenses it would incur. But it's been bullshit since probably 1998 that Vince McMahon couldn't. You were going to say something.
Yeah, if you look at wrestling, let's say in the late 80s, WWF, I think if things were done right, a Hulk Hogan would be an employee and the job guys on the taping would be independent contractors.
Yeah.
And it would be probably job guys. Sorry, Dustin. and undercard guys and guys coming in for one shot here and there, and that'd be it. Everyone else would be a real employee. You know, all the guys that were working regulars 6-7 days a week, those were employees.
And you had to kind of also evaluate talent properly then, which is not something that's done these days, because, somebody will say, well, if they only paid so-and-so to come in from Mexico every once in a while per shot, then he might sign with the WWE. Well, then good for him. Because if I'm bringing a motherfucker in for a shot every once in a while, I'm not going to really miss him if he's gone, am I? But anyway.
There's another part of this whole story, the AEW lawsuits, Jim. We'll talk more about this as it transpires, but I guess as the news broke, or shortly after it, I think it was the same day, Jim Ross went on a podcast and dismissed the whole thing, called it frivolous, said that,
well, hold on now.
Because Tony Khan has more money, that it's impossible to win against that.
Hold on now. And yes, he did say that. And I've dismissed the whole thing as a characterization. But here the problem becomes, I like Kevin Kelly. Of course, I like Stephen P. Nude. I like Jim Ross. Right? Tate's, I particularly don't care either way.
The boys.
I'm just being honest. I've met him like once in my fucking life, so I don't care. But again, this is almost like the fucking thing with Kevin and Ian, in that everybody is being sensitive. And I wish that they would not feel the need to comment as they do, in public, if you will. But JR basically, yes, he did say, and he equated this suit, which is why I disequated it, with that thing from the shyster, the Greek lawyer. What was it?
Constantine Kryos or Kairos or
Kairos.
It was definitely Constantine with a K.
Yeah, well, his clients were crying afterwards because he didn't do shit. He couldn't even write his writs properly. And if you've read the writs that he's written, you'll know they were really ill-written writs. But anyway, he equated it with that type of suit, like the suit before, and used the word frivolous. And unfortunately, he was being prodded for an answer on pending litigation against a company that he currently works for. So what's he going to say? He can't really tell the truth, but he shouldn't use the word frivolous because he ought to know that Stephen don't do frivolous. So that provoked some ill feelings there, is possibly where you were going.
Well, yeah, he made these comments. Stephen P. New heard the comments and responded. I have his comments here. Do you want to hear those?
I certainly do.
Here's what he had to say.
Because it will help when we hear from the peanut gallery after that again. Go ahead.
I need to make a response. JR, Jim Ross, called this lawsuit frivolous. Well, let me tell you something, Bula Bula. This is not a frivolous lawsuit. You're part of the problem. You, Jim Ross, are part of the problem. Because you fed the guys in WWE, as talent relations, these crap contracts for a quarter of a century. You told these guys that it was a take-it-or-leave-it deal, and they needed to sign these crap contracts that were contracts of adhesion, that they should have never have signed, or they should have lined the arbitration provisions out of it. I'm not shocked in the least that you go on a podcast and you say this is a frivolous lawsuit. I might lose it, but by God, it's not frivolous. I can tell you that. Tony Khan's paid JR a lot of money to do nothing for about 5 years now. And so, if I were Jim Ross, and I were living at Jacksonville Beach, and making a bunch of money to not do much at all, I'd probably come out and call Stephen P. New's lawsuit frivolous also. Everybody's got a price. And those were Stephen's comments.
Well, there was a prickly but understandable response to a major attorney being accused of filing a frivolous suit. However, I will say that one of my new favorite sayings, Brian, both of these things can be true. JR was having all those people sign crap contracts because he was the head of talent relations in the WWF. But JR didn't write the crap contracts. JR was the messenger of death, but the crap contracts were written by not even Vince McMahon, but at Vince McMahon's direction for the terms that he wanted to keep these independent contractors under control. And it was, again, a take it or leave it proposition for almost everybody except Hulk Hogan or Steve Austin or maybe The Rock or whatever, that you would either sign, once you had negotiated the terms you could negotiate, merchandising, compensation, possibly time off, those type of things. What you couldn't negotiate your way out of was you're an independent contractor. You have no employment rights. You have no profit sharing, pension, 401k, health insurance benefits, all those things that we always heard in the wrestling business that people got when they had a job at Acme Widget or whatever.
Well, the other
that
thing
was,
is,
I'm just saying that was true, that JR was saying take it or leave it because that was the conditions of the company that he also worked for as well. So he never said, and I mean, I've heard some of the negotiations and obviously been in some, nobody ever said, well, this is a wonderful thing for your retirement and your health insurance and all that stuff. It was, here's the way the deals work, but here's what you're going to get. But, there weren't any other deals in the wrestling business, so that's why you couldn't get them. So both of these things can be true. JR did make people sign those crap contracts because they wanted to sign them because those are the only kind of contracts they were going to get.
But what exactly does he think is frivolous is what we don't know. Does he think the defamation cases, independently against Tony Khan by the Tates and against Ian Riccaboni by Kevin Kelly, those are frivolous? Or that the idea that wrestlers should be classified as independent contractors and that AEW is falsely misclassifying them as frivolous?
I think he is mischaracterizing this whole thing as being frivolous because other people have tried it and done a poor job of it and not been able to demonstrate their case or present their case well. And we've said all along, this is especially with the WWE, but now Tony wants to play with the big boys, that this is the Achilles heel of the wrestling industry as an industry, is that the fucking wrestlers are still like, when I used to call a guy up that lives 6 hours away and say, hey, can you make Marietta on Thursday the 20th be there at 7 o'clock? Sure. And there was the fucking contract, right? It's so this is the Achilles heel. And I think JR just assumes, because he probably hadn't paid a lot of attention or read much about this, or probably give a shit, that this is another one of those deals. And again, I can't speak for the Tates and defamation, because I don't know what their character is to begin with. But with Kevin Kelly, there's been goddamn, fucking violence, physical violence, verbal threatening, and fucking felons involved in some of the shit in AEW that didn't get fired. So I'd like to hear more about what's up with that.
Well, again, with his thing with the defamation, it's specific against Ian Riccaboni for labeling him as QAnon, which he is saying that he is not.
Well, and again, yes, I was talking about the Tates with the defamation for the fucking no-shows with Tony. I don't give a shit there. I'd like to see, do we have pictures of Kevin at a QAnon fucking planning commission? I'd like to see more of that. But the thing that I'm really interested in is let's just open up these contracts where you can promise a guy, we'll leave your other job and we'll pay you for 3 years, except when we change our mind in 9 months because of something that we couldn't take care of internally, we'll just fucking fire you. And what are you going to do about it? And or what working conditions are the people under that, well, exactly, Your Honor. Why, or Your Honor might say to counselor, why is it that these guys are so desperate to work for you that they will fucking drive 3 hours, 200 miles down the road to an airport to fly to another country, to get in a fucking car, to drive over to a building and get thrown around and beat up by somebody, and then repeat that fucking trip home. And you can't even fly them out of their own fucking backyard or whatever. That's the issue, is are we going to open up any of these contracts and see what they look like? Don't you think?
Well, we shall see. Again, Jim Ross pointed out Tony Khan has a lot of money and he can fight, until everyone else runs out of money.
Well, but that assumes that I don't want to reveal because I don't know for sure, but I don't believe that Stephen P. New is asking Kevin Kelly or Huey and Dewey Tate, whatever their first names are, to give him large upfront fees. Is there a nicer way of saying this? He's not in this for the money.
I could tell you, knowing Steven, he's always wanted to change the conditions in the wrestling business for the wrestlers so that it's better for them.
Yes, I'm not thinking that Kevin Kelly and the Tates are going to spend an incredible amount of money on this, unless, of course, they win $6 billion or whatever. And I bet it's going to cost him a pretty penny for Steven's involvement. But he doesn't need the money and he doesn't need the work. He needs more time with his lovely daughter, Rebecca. So I don't think he's doing this just as, oh, gosh, where's my rent coming from next month? I better retain another client. That's and that's another thing that JR probably does not know because he's not close to the situation. But that's the point, is that this is not ambulance chasing as has been done in the past. This is going to be a legitimately run operation here.
But you see some of the chatter online, and it's ridiculous. The idea that because he represents you, because he represents me, because he represented CM Punk or Ace Steel and various other people you don't even know about, I'm sure. I don't even know about. That because of that somehow this is like just a baseless attack on AEW, because that's what we do. We go after them in the courts and try to beat them. This is a real case. Filed in a real court.
Hey, and let me say one thing. I found out, remember years ago, before we even started doing this show, I was fighting against a developer that was doing a subdivision across the road from me on the empty property over there. And when the neighbors and I got together, we found out of all of the real estate lawyers, real estate attorneys in town, guess how many of those attorneys represented the homeowners instead of the developers?
How many?
One.
Wow.
One. So when you hear about any competent attorney that represents more than one person in the wrestling business, you have to kind of figure it's because most of the fucking people in the wrestling business that have attorneys are the goddamn ones with all the money, which is generally the fucking promoters.
And by the way, technically now he represents the entire roster of AEW, because if this class action thing goes through, he represents everyone who's ever worked there and anyone who works there.
Whether they like it or not.
John Moxley, meet your new attorney, Stephen P. New. Jim, before we wrap this up, Tony Khan.
Well, that's why I was going to save the best for last. Tony Khan had to weigh in on, we just read the statement that Stephen made to the statement that JR made. And then Tony tweeted this, and I'll let you read the tweet.
From the night before the pay-per-view, by the way. I've just read Stephen P. New's comments about Jim Ross. I'm shocked and appalled by these comments on legend Jim Ross, part of AEW's foundation, someone so important from the beginning of AEW, and still right now today. AEW, JR, and I reserve all rights. See you tonight at AEW All Out. Oh, it was actually the day of. Excuse me, I was wrong.
Yeah, he was so appalled he still got the fucking see you tonight at the pay-per-view plug-in. But
see, this is where it gets to be bullshit. This is where he's pandering, trying to rally people online to get behind AEW the weekend of a pay-per-view.
Well, here's the thing. It almost worked with me because I saw that before I actually heard what Steven had said about what JR had said. And I'm like, oh my God. Because I didn't realize again, but this is the equivalent of Tony fearing for his life again. Remember, he cut to promo on TV when nobody had seen the footage, just heard the story that I've never been scared for my life at a wrestling event before. But I was afraid for my life.
I reserve all rights.
All rights to his life. But no, he said that after the all-in thing last year at Wembley. And then by the time maybe the impact of that statement wore off by the time they actually marked themselves into playing the footage where it showed that Tony was witness to a fucking front face lock at a scuffle and was yelled at for 3 seconds from somebody on the other side of a fucking table.
And then he got hit really hard because then his ratings went away.
Well, that's what he was scared. He was scared for his ratings. But that's the thing is, now he issues this tweet like the ultimate drama queen, the tweeting equivalent of I was scared for my life. And I see that and I thought, oh my God, has Steven gone out of his mind? What is he saying about Jim Ross? And then I read the quote of him. What the fuck? Appalled? Besides, what does boola boola mean?
Maybe that's a West Virginia thing. I'll look it up.
Is it it's boomer sooner? Is boola boola? Boola boola, boola boola. That's some kind of college. Anyway, besides
it's the
that,
football song of Yale University.
Okay, I'm not sure where that came in, but nevertheless, unless that is some type of comment about Jim Ross's sainted mother, then no, he said, Jim, you push the crap contracts. You know what's in them because JR does know what's in them. He knows they're crap contracts. Those were the only kind, as I mentioned before, that you could have in wrestling, and he didn't write them. But he didn't. Stephen P. New did not say anything appalling about Jim Ross in that. Did you see appalling?
See, this is where it's so stupid that Tony would do this. You want to talk about people saying appalling things about Jim Ross? Bring a lawsuit about this, you reserve all rights, because I could tell you firsthand some of the text messages and some of the things people in that company have been saying about him since the beginning. I think he would probably be appalled by them. I think most people probably would be.
It was when they all had a fucking uproar. Remember, because this was years ago when he had first started and he made the comment, I've told them they all roll out on the floor and cluster up like quail and wait for some dumbass to dive and hit them. And they got upset at him saying that on his podcast or wherever because he'd said it to them and they still fucking do it. And they were saying worse things about Jim Ross, the talent in AEW. On Twitter was saying worse things about Jim Ross then than Steven just said now. The fuck? Are you out of your mind?
And again, don't clutch your pearls with this kind of stuff because you won't win this one. I mean, trust me.
Yeah,
the stories that have been around about Jim Ross's AEW run, and I feel bad with some of them, and some of them are self-induced, but give me a break. Give me a break.
But I am not knocking Jim Ross here, and I'm not knocking Stephen P. New.
No, I'm knocking Tony Khan. I'm knocking Tony Khan.
Well, I was about to say, you jumped in front of me. I'm knocking Tony Khan again for stirring shit up. He doesn't help anything. He stirs shit. Oh, these shocking and appalling comments. Yeah, about your shitty contracts, Tony, and your play company. And again, it's tricky. JR said this was the biggest announcing contract he'd ever signed in the business. And that pretty much means it's the biggest one ever.
And think about his run in AEW. He was the lead announcer. Then they moved him from that to put Excalibur there. Then eventually they just moved him off Wednesday nights altogether. He's had a few health issues, obviously. Several health issues. We've seen photos of them. And then now they just bring him back at random times. He appeared randomly a couple times doing interviews, like sit-down interviews in a hotel or something on TV.
When he was first there and he was healthy and he was there every week, they wouldn't fucking listen to him. So what the fuck? But the point is, yes, they have paid him a lot of money, so no, I don't expect him to say, shit, Tony's fucked. But I do wish that he had not used the word frivolous. Frivolous to an attorney of stature is like a red flag in front of a bull, isn't it? Or did we establish that the bulls are colorblind and they're going on the motion?
I don't know.
Frivolous is not a good word a gird word. Frivolous is not a good word, gird, to use to an attorney of note.
No, he'll use a gird buster on it.
Yes, and then you'll get your gird busted. But we're going to keep people up to date on this whole situation, aren't we, as it unfolds?
No, we certainly will, because I'm very curious how this is going to turn out. And again, Tony had a lot to say about Jim Ross, the appalling comments about him. Nothing to say about wrestlers not being employees. You know, even if you want to say he can't say anything about the defamation thing, come on. I mean, Tony's a longtime fan. He's been on message boards. He may have even been one of the people complaining about the way WWE has treated wrestlers in the past. He knows what he should do, and he knows what he could do.
You know, honest to God, the way he treats the wrestlers now, and with the perks like letting him fly around in his private plane and shit, I'm not sure that it may not be cheaper for him to make them employees. God damn.
That's true.
And you know, it's almost, I'll say this and then I'll shut up about it and we'll move along. But it's almost easier as a former talent who has seen all various sides of it, or maybe even just a current talent. It's easier to take when the WWE won't make you an employee. You're an independent contractor. You got to take care of this or do that or whatever the case, or we own your likenesses or whatever their rules are. It's easier to take it from them than it is from Tony, because Tony is so goddamn not only charitable and giving, but also there's no fiscal responsibility. It's not like there's a pressure to hit a budget or nail a projection or make any fucking money around there. And it's an endless goddamn cornucopia, horn of plenty for a lot of guys that on the indies weren't making, you know, a tenth of what they're making now to just show up and sit in catering. So I think it's more, I'm just saying the point is it's easier to get mad at Tony for not doing it than the WWE, because at least they're trying to have a bottom line, even though it's huge.
You know, the other thing is, and we'll end with this, I guess, the media rights deal is coming up. I'm of the belief that they've already got the deal done with Warner Brothers. Again, Warner Brothers, from what we've always heard from people outside of wrestling going back to the beginning, had a piece of everything. So that'd be probably tough to untangle. I think there's a deal already, and obviously they'll get an increase. But here's the question. For the people who think AEW will get a slight increase, to the people who think they'll get double what they're getting now, or for the people who crazily think they'll get more than that, the idea that AEW will now be profitable because the investment will have paid off because of the rights increase, does anyone think that's going to mean Tony will spend less? Oh man, we got all this money coming in now. I should probably stop spending. And wrestlers' contracts are coming up. And you know, let me just bring this up because I just saw this earlier. They were talking about Kevin Owens' contract. I read something about this. His last 3 years, I think he made like $2.5 million, $3 million, something like that.
I think it was 2.5, 2.75, and 3, or some escalation of that.
Right. So that was over 3 years. And at that time, it was one of the higher contracts in WWE. Now, Swerve has a better contract than that in AEW, I saw that Dave Meltzer reported. So that's what we talk about, the money and the spending going forward. The
human pincushion has a better contract than that.
Hey, Kevin Owens is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. Using him as an example, not even saying it has to be him.
I think Steen will end up in AEW. I bet you by golly wow.
Because here's the thing. If you stop and you think about it, where should I be for my career? Where will I have less frustration? Where will I make plenty of money and be on a big stage? WWE is the answer. Especially under Paul Levesque. It's the answer. However, and this is where I think it's only going to get more crazy going forward, especially with a rights increase, Tony Khan could say to a Kevin Owens or anyone in WWE that's a top star, I will triple your salary to come work here. And all of a sudden, I mean, he's already doing it. You know, you saw that WWE apparently is not happy about the Swerve contract and the Daniel Garcia negotiations. He's already offering more money to guys that haven't really, that may not be at that level where they've done it for enough years where they would get that money traditionally, I guess. So now we could really get into a new thing where if he's got the television deal and he's got more money, he could start throwing stupid money around to get talent.
Well, let me ask you, if they've got the deal done already, why don't they announce it? I just saw somebody say, we think within the next month we'll announce it. If it's already done, why are they waiting? What is the upside of waiting?
I don't know. I can't answer that. And again, this is just my hunch.
Well, is it maybe they didn't get double, but maybe they got a little bit more because they've done something with the pay-per-views or they've whatever?
See, that's the play, and I said this to you months ago. If they do a renewal with Warner Brothers Discovery, it has to come with a Max or HBO Max. It used to be, it was better named. HBO's a better brand than Max. No offense to MJF or anyone else. But they need that. Because then you don't have to worry about people going to multiple places to buy pay-per-view. Hopefully you'll be getting income to cover some of that pay-per-view revenue from the streaming partner.
Well, but nevertheless, they're fucking mad money.
Then the archive has a place to go. Right now, there's no home for the AEW archive. Whether we like them or not, they've got 5 years of not just Dynamite, but all these bullshit shows that no one watches. The YouTube ones that used to exist and the current ones. That's a lot of content. There's nowhere that it's housed.
I'm saying all of these things, but the point I'm making is that unless they're still fine-tuning all this bullshit, I don't know why they would get more money for the television program alone that they're producing now that has all-time record low viewerships. But if they've done a package that's a little bit more, but it's not stunningly more, or if you break it down, which, you know, Thurston Howell III or a bunch of the people online are gonna, maybe it's not that thrilling, it's just more money for more shit. Is that why he's kind of peddling it out slowly? Who the fuck knows? But like you said, it's not like he's gonna stop spending money. And how long, if now he can run at a $50 million a year profit from this point onward, as soon as this deal kicks in, still, how long is it going to take before he recoups the money that he's spent to this point in time and then stays ahead of the goddamn money?
Well, time will tell, but as we've always said, AEW is going nowhere. Where it may be on TV, whether it is on TV or not, remains to be seen, but it's not going anywhere. So that's, I think, they're going to be the next big story after the TV deal. Is how much money is Tony going to start throwing around at top flight free agents whenever anyone comes up? Because now we have a very limited pool of people who would ever come up that are really, you can't call anyone a game changer because once you get to AEW, you know, it's going to take a long rebuilding process for that to work. But there's a lot of things to look at. I mean, right now, all of the stars who is a star, a really name attraction in the WWE that is almost over the hill, that is pretty much, this is as popular and as over and as big as this guy's ever going to be. He's been there for a while at that position. He ain't getting any younger. And because LA Knight's new. Jey Uso.
No. Figure the Usos out of this equation because they're not going to break up the family with this bloodline being so hot. Owens fits that category because he's been there a while. Can you say that Kevin Owens is going to, in the future, be more over in the WWE and used better and more popular than he ever has been before?
No, I think best case scenario is kind of stay in place.
Sami Zayn, whenever his deal may be up, could you say the same thing for him?
More than likely, yeah.
They like those guys. They're personal friends. But on the other side, Cody Rhodes ain't going anywhere. Roman Reigns ain't going anywhere. Logan Paul ain't going anywhere. LA Knight ain't going to go anywhere. I mean, Randy Orton ain't going anywhere. Rhea Ripley ain't going anywhere. Sounds like the goddamn cast list of MGM, more stars than there are in the heavens. The Damian Priest at this point wouldn't go anywhere. All of those, I mean, all of their top guys are kind of fresh, younger top guys, except for an Orton who is finishing his career in the WWE. So
he's going to throw a ton of money at Kevin Owens if his contract comes up and he doesn't sign a renewal. He'll get one of the biggest offers in wrestling history from Tony Khan, you would think.
Yeah, and he'll go there, and I bet you Sammy would too. But the thing is, Edge went there. It didn't make a fucking difference. They will be booked.
But that's the example of someone wrapping up their career in WWE that all of a sudden went to AEW. I thought, he had his little run here. I wasn't crazy about it, but it's kind of winding down. Then he went to AEW.
Yes, and I'm just saying that no matter what the level of attraction that leaves WWE, nobody is going to make a significant difference for any length of time in AEW, no matter how good they are or not, because it just happens. It's a hole that they fall into. But nobody on the WWE roster that is in the really upper echelon and is on an upward trajectory either is going to leave that or would leave it or is capable of leaving it. I see Owens and Zayn fitting the category. I don't see anybody else fitting that would make any difference in AEW's business whatsoever.
Well, this will be an interesting story going forward, especially with Tony making allegations about WWE tampering with contracts. And again, this is one of those things where be careful, because things can go both ways, and things have. So be careful, but...
Yeah, I've known a bunch of people that have gone both ways.
No, but didn't they even say, like, the beginning of AEW, they tried to get AJ Styles and Gallows and Anderson to jump?
Yeah, I believe they did. That's why they gave Gallows and Anderson those big contracts. $500,000 or more. No, $750,000. $750,000 a year. And then, as soon as they saw what AEW was when it debuted on television, they fucking gave them their notice like 3 months later.
Yeah, so be careful, because there's plenty of people in every company that talk to lots of people. It may not always be Bruce Pritchard, but there's plenty of people in every company that talk to plenty of people. But that's the AEW legal news update. People
who talk to people are the luckiest people in the world.